The First World War was modern war and total war, and many traditional tactics and strategies no longer worked. Over the course of the war, all of the armies developed new weapons and new doctrines. We've done specials about a variety of these things, but this is the final installment of the evolution of the German army in World War I. I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a Great War special about the German Army in 1917 and 1918. During that time period, Quartermaster General Erich Ludendorff made fundamental changes to the German Army based on his experiences in warfare on the Eastern Front. The German Army in 1915 and 1916, under Chief of Staff Erich von Falkenhayn, was stuck in the old doctrine of the immovable battlefield. He believed that every inch of ground had to be contested, or if lost, recaptured immediately. This led to horrendous casualties, since there was no flexibility for things like using more favorable terrain or moving vulnerable troops out of range of enemy fire. Whole battalions were lost in the least imaginative offensive of the war, as some historians describe Verdun, where German soldiers advanced into killing fields. When Paul von Hindenburg and Ludendorff visited Verdun after replacing Falkenhayn in charge of the armies, they agreed that to win the war would require a complete rethinking of Germany's tactical approach. Ludendorff had learned on the Eastern Front that ground itself was not important, fighting power was. He instructed not only his senior commanders in his doctrines, but also NCOs and even frontline platoon leaders in a new line of tactical commands. In 1917, he issued Principles of Command in the Defensive Battle in Position Warfare, and in 1918, the Attack in Position Warfare. The endless expanses of Russian territory showed the limits of operational warfare, and commanders there valued tactical success. Operational warfare had always been the traditional emphasis of the German General Staff, but it certainly could not annihilate the Russian army in a two-front war. Even against Romania, which was a textbook case of operational maneuvering warfare, they couldn't annihilate the entire Romanian army. See, before 1914, the word breakthrough didn't even appear in many military handbooks. It was too dangerous, and the attacking armies moved too slowly for it to work. Operations meant massive enveloping movements, but these were just not possible anymore. Certainly not on the Western Front. I mean, what good were strategic objectives in trench warfare? But breakthrough is what Ludendorff wanted to achieve, and to do so, he needed the expertise of two men. One was Oskar von Hutier. He had not only studied the experiences of German assault troops in battle, but also German analysis of enemy tactics, in particular French movement and fire doctrine and the shock troop tactics of Russian General Aleksei Brusilov. Hutier refined this to maximum effectiveness. Instead of assault waves that stacked up against centers of enemy resistance, he envisioned quick infiltration movement. Stormtroops were to penetrate the enemy's weak spots and bypass the strong, which would surround and isolate them. There would be a system of leaps and bounds. As one group advanced, another would cover them, and they would move rapidly through enemy lines. To increase their firepower, they were equipped with a newly developed light machine gun, the MG-08-15, 6 of them per company. Reserves would be sent in to either mop up the isolated strongpoints or to follow into the breaches. Unlike earlier, they would only be sent in where attacks were successful, and decentralized assault squads could attack the enemy from the flanks or the rear. But his whole system would only work by relying on shock and an already weakened defense system. That's where the other man comes in. Georg Bruchmüller. Bruchmüller was an artillery genius by any standard, and he designed a system to work with the shock troops. His preliminary artillery barrage was in 3 phases over just 5 hours. This was very different from what the Allies did. To avoid a lengthy, less effective barrage, targets would be meticulously mapped and pre-registered. Bruchmüller did not believe that destroying the enemy defense system was possible, but neutralizing it was. Phase 1 was half an hour long, aimed at troop concentrations and communications hubs, and was mostly gas shells. Phase 2 was 2.5 hours long. This was aimed at each enemy gun identified by aerial photography or that had fired back in Phase 1. It was 50-50 gas and high explosive shells. Phase 3 was 2 hours of mostly high explosives aimed at both infantry and artillery. A creeping barrage would open near the end of that phase, under which the German infantry would advance. The barrage was flexible and would halt at points, waiting for the infantry's pyrotechnic signals to continue. Bruchmüller's artillery relied heavily on gas shells. Long gone were simple gas screens that offered only moments of shock value. The new system had 3 agents, sorted by colors. There was Blue Cross, which was non-persistent and non-lethal, but clogged gas masks and forced their removal. Green Cross was non-persistent but was lethal. Yellow Cross was persistent, lethal, and also blistered exposed skin. To achieve synergy, Blue and Green Cross were fired simultaneously right in front of an advance, so they would dissipate before German troops arrived. Yellow Cross was shot at enemy flanks or artillery, and its persistent nature would close off those areas and slow, or eliminate, counterattacks. The Germans called this Buntschießen. Bruchmüller believed gas had a higher suppression factor than high explosive shells, so his artillery didn't have to fire as often and could be used with less accuracy when targets were not well identified. Doing all of this required reorganizing German artillery units from defensive to offensive engagement. For defensive fire, they had been decentralized, so he had to re-centralize them, which had the advantage of using fewer but better trained artillery officers. Divisional artillery would work in close battle and corps artillery in deep battle. For maximum effect, the artillery had to be concealed until the final moment. It was to destroy control of the defense system, not the system itself. Without the ability to coordinate, the enemy could not effectively respond, and suppressed and confused soldiers would be overwhelmed by the shock troops while their system of command was disrupted. There was also aircraft developed specifically to help disrupt the enemy. They were designed to strafe ground troops with machine guns and drop small bombs, and they had extra armor on their undersides. Slower than fighter planes, they flew as low as possible and would distract the enemy at just the moment his eyes should be focused in front of him. The assault at Riga and the counterattack at Cambrai had shown the effectiveness of this combined system. That last as the first successful methodical assault by German troops on the Western Front since Verdun ended, and the enemy, unused to playing defense, now faced a meticulously planned system that was brutally effective. These were the tactics that were used to the greatest degree in the German spring offensives of 1918, the Kaiserschlacht, but most of them would remain in the German Army handbook until well into the Second World War. I'd like to thank Marcus Linke for doing the research for this episode. Marcus, thank you. Yeah, he's in that direction. You can't see, but you know. Okay, we do actually now have a whole playlist containing our episodes about the German Army evolution during the war, and you can revisit that right here. For more photos of the German Army in 1918, check out our Facebook and Instagram pages, and do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.